Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Meet the Masters. Today is the 13th in our webinar series, and we're pleased to have you with us. This is a webinar series with Canadians who've dedicated their careers to learning the art and science of insurance sales and service. Webinars in this series are now scheduled through the end of the year, and more are being added to the schedule daily. Over the years, I've observed that every successful insurance agent whom I've met has succeeded differently, even if they're in the same field, deal with similar clients, and even if they're related or in business together. This is what makes the sales and servicing of insurance one of the best careers that I can imagine. It's possible to become a success in our business with diligence, integrity, and experience. With this webinar series, we intend to prove that any type of person can succeed with time and hard, thoughtful work. Our goal is to create a video record for each of these masters of insurance so that some of their expertise and experience will be available to those who'd like to learn from them in the future. Today, we have Brian Mallard with us, and Julian Wise will be interviewing Brian. Brian started in business, or started his career in 1970, but in 1973, he became associated with the Canada Life Insurance and joined the insurance business. Brian is a real believer in education and being an informed and knowledgeable advisor. He founded in 1980 Dataplan Consulting Associates, which became Dataplan Financial Services, and then the Dataplan Group of Companies, and it was sold to Assante Capital Management. Brian has continued as an advisor. He's been the chair of advocates and has been a major player in politics and in his community. I'd like to welcome Brian Mallard and Julian Wise to Meet the Masters. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Lawrence. Good morning, Brian from Saskatoon, all that way, from Oakville.
You can say snowy Saskatoon. We got 6 inches of snow last night, so winter is still challenging us, to say the least.
My goodness. Well, thank you for being able to make it with your,
no
with your
problem.
snowshoes and all.
Okay.
Brian, how did you get started in this business?
Well, as Lawrence outlined, I was hired by Canada Life November 14th of 1973. And I had met somebody in the university bookstore, and this individual who was a salesperson for Canada Life bought me a coffee and got talking to me. And he said, you know, you'd make an awfully good advisor. Well, he called me a salesman. So I said, really, what does it pay? And he looked at me and he said, whatever you want. And I kind of went, well, that's intriguing. You got to remember, I was 22 years old and not overly as wise as I am today. So I went off and I had a meeting with the sales manager, and I had a meeting eventually with the manager, and I got hired on November 14th, as I said. So Bud Enright stood me by the window and said, what do you see? And I said, Saskatoon. And he said, right, here's your rate book. I'll see you in 6 months. That was my training. That and a cold call kit. And so I was doing cold calling, etc., for months and months and months. Now, if any of you have ever done cold calling, you are going to heaven because you've already been in hell. It is the worst way of introducing yourself to a stranger. It's just awful. So long story short, I got thinking about this and thinking, somebody once said to me, you know, you can't really influence a person until you get them smiling. See, I've seen Julian smile a couple of times this morning, so I got him already. So the way the cold call went is, hi, my name is Brian Mallard. I work with Canada Life. I sell life insurance, and I'm just wondering, if you were to die, would your wife and family be okay? This is not a good way to start a conversation. And so in many instances, I was told to have sex with myself and other things. And so I got thinking about this, and I got to think, okay, I got to get him smiling. I got to get him smiling. So I came up with a shtick, a different kind of shtick. And it was, if life insurance was free, how much would you take? And almost everybody has the same answer. Well, as much as I could get. Well, here's the problem. It's not the product that's the problem, it's the premium. So let's solve for the premium and we'll solve the problem. And so that was exactly what I did. I had an accounting designation, an RIA, and that was it. I started using that very, very consistently, and I wound up getting probably a 50% hit rate. 50% of the people would sit down and we try to find the premium. That's something I do to this day. I try to find the premium. You have to solve for the premium. So it became relatively straightforward to sell life insurance once you establish where you're going to get the premium from. It was just a
How do you
logical.
do that, Brian? How do you do that?
How do I do that today?
Yes.
I examine people's financial situation. I take a look at their assets and liabilities, their income and expenses, strategies and tactics, and I come up with the premium. What's the free cash flow? What's the free cash flow? So how much of the free cash flow can we dedicate to the purchase of a life insurance contract? And literally, I still do that to this day. That's exactly the process that I go through.
And Brian, so how was it a quick start? Did you start slow and earn like $100 a month, or what happened for you?
I got lucky. My father worked at the National Research Council. So and I used to go up there when I was a kid. They had a theater in the National Research Council building, and every Friday afternoon they would show movies from a variety of sources, all scientifically oriented. There were no movies that were like you'd find at a theater. Anyway, I'd go up there and I'd hang out with all of these PhD people and lab technicians, and they got to know me. And so I got referred by my father because one of them said, "What's Brian doing these days?" And he said, "Oh, he's selling life insurance." He said, "Funny you should mention that. I'm thinking of buying an insurance contract." So I went over to his house, George's house, and I sold him a life insurance contract. The premium was $4,500. My commission and bonus was more money than I had made the previous year. And I remembered what Al said and said, it's whatever you ask, right? The amount of money you can earn is whatever you can ask. That's the limitation. I thought this job might have legs. It might have legs. But I still was in the cold calling business. And so I had sold a contract to my wife's brother, 32 years old. And I was walking down the hall one night to quit up, and Marlene had phoned the office and had said, Norm died. So this 32-year-old male died.
Now, Marlene's your
and
wife.
I never got a chance to.
Is Marlene your wife?
Marlene is my wife. Yes, I'm sorry. She is my wife. So I never got a chance to quit because I wound up having to settle, the insurance claim and help out with the family, get the estate done, all of that sort of stuff. So I saw what life insurance did. I saw exactly what it did, what it was meant for. And I became, it changed my perspective from selling a policy to changing people's lives. That's what it really does in the long haul. So I never got a chance to quit. I came up with if life insurance was free, how much would you take? And, I was a busy guy. Then, the rest is history.
All right. So what are your unique abilities, and how do they affect who you are as an insurance professional and as a person?
Well, one of the things that I think I'm very good at is solving a puzzle. To this day, I played mahjong and other kinds of puzzles, and I like that. I like the intellectual engagement that it incurs. Right, I like that. And so when I look at a person's financial situation, it's a puzzle. Generally speaking, most people aren't good at solving their own puzzle. So I'm much better at it because I have the skill sets. However, you have to solve the puzzle as if you were the client, wanting what the client wants and having what the client has, but using your strategies and tactics. So it becomes me being the client. And so I say to everybody, I say, be the client, be the client. Don't be the salesperson, be the client. And so that's the mantra that we use. Over the years, my planning process has encompassed Monte Carlo probability analysis. I was one of the I worked with a guy in 1990, a guy named David Gobiel, and we crafted an Excel spreadsheet. Actually, it was Lotus 123 back in that day, and we utilized Monte Carlo probability analysis to determine what the probability is of a plan succeeding. So we were one of the first people that ever used that kind of thing, and I use it to this day. And over 30 years of using this process, we've never had a plan fail.
Wow. Can you describe a little bit what Monte Carlo is very briefly for those that are listening that may not understand it?
It's not arithmetic, okay? It's actually math. So you have to take a look at, let's say a portfolio. So you've got a bunch of assets that you're going to be put into a portfolio that come to the table with rates of return historically, et cetera. And so it's probably easier for me to describe IQ than it is to describe the portfolio. So the average IQ in Canada is 100. Now, really smart people, the first standard deviation is 115 and 85. That encompasses 2/3 of the population. So the next standard deviation is 130 and 70. That's the second standard deviation. It covers 87% of the population. So you keep doing this. So we took everything out to the sixth standard deviation to see if there was a probability of failure. Sooner or later, you're going to have it fail. All plans fail. You got to find the failures because nobody cares about the successes. Those work. When they don't work, you have to figure out, okay, is this going to be problematic or is this going to be something that we can accommodate? Maybe we have to adjust the portfolio. Maybe we have to adjust some of the assumptions that we've made just to make sure that the thing is going to work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I give you a client example of this? I had a client come in who's been a client for a very long time. He was a missionary in Africa, and he's 75 years old, and he wants to retire. He's a physician. So he's got a whole bunch of money with me, and he had an objective for his retirement. He wanted, about $9,000 a month out of his portfolio, together with his pensions, Canada Pension, Old Age Security, et cetera. So we ran all of this and said at $9,000 a month, it has a 95% probability of working. So we thought that was success. And so when it failed, how badly did it fail? It wasn't bad enough to cause him to have to go into the poorhouse. So he comes back and he says, I'd like to have $11,000 a month. So we ran the program with $11,000 a month, and it had a 57% probability of success. So it's going to fail one time in two. So it's very sensitive, like $2,000 more, the thing failed. It's really important that you communicate that to the client. As you can imagine, if you're going to put in place mechanisms that will crater the plan, you have to know that, right? And most people have no idea about what I just talked about.
Good point. Excellent point. So write it down, folks, and read up on it.
Yeah.
It'll help your
Well,
life.
if you use not Dataplan or Conquest, both of those use Monte Carlo probability analysis to determine whether this is going to work or not.
So, Brian, you started out as an insurance guy.
Yep.
And did you continue for the rest of your career up till now as an insurance guy, or give us a progression of what you did?
Well,
you did it.
For the first 20 years, I was definitely an insurance guy, right? MDRT, top of the table, all of that kind of stuff, all the accolades. And eventually, I kind of quit all the accolades. Like, I don't belong to MDRT anymore. I don't belong to top of the table. I have the qualifications. I wasn't getting much out of it. So I just thought, why do I need that? Ego gratification, I could probably get that somewhere else. So I was an insurance guy, but I was not overly happy. I thought there was more to this in terms of solving the puzzle. So I started to branch out into asset management because they kind of dovetailed together. You can't just look at the insurance stuff. You have to look at the more holistic financial situation of the client. And so that's financial planning. And so here's a really interesting statement. Nobody wants a product, but everybody wants a plan. So you got to think about that. So when you do a plan, you actually have to be the client. Again, that goes back to be the client. You see what I'm getting at? So we started doing integrated financial planning, including life insurance, including all of the investments, all of the pension assets, et cetera, the whole financial scenario surrounding the client, and finding out what they have and what they're doing and how they're doing it, et cetera. And then using our knowledge, we would improve the plan and with a great probability of success. So that's what we started doing. It was more and more. So I took the roughly 250 life insurance customers that I had and did financial plans for them. And they referred me to approximately 150 people, like immediately. Because I would say, well, who else do you know that could benefit from this process? And, about 60% of them had names. You got to ask, right? You can't just assume that they're just going to give you referrals. You have to justify what you're doing and then ask for a referral.
So do you ask prospects or clients for referrals all the time, or
All the
how
time.
does that work for you?
It works pretty well. So, but in terms of how do I do it, it's the same process. You've seen how we work. One of the things we like to do is meet new people that could benefit from the work that we do. Do you have anybody top of mind that you might want to refer to us?
And
So,
they give you names and they give you people, do they?
that's correct. Now, here's the deal, though. I need them to introduce me to them. That's a much more relevant referral than simply getting a name and me calling them. No. If I was getting a referral from Julian, I would want Julian to call the client and say, I just had this experience. It was amazing, and you came to mind. I think you would really benefit from it.
What are your thoughts on the industry, the profession, past, present, and future?
Well, I'm an old guy now. I used to be the youngest guy around, but I'm not anymore. I'm the oldest guy around, it seems. So I'll give you an example of a tactic that we use. We use high cash value life insurance using additional deposit options as a proxy for fixed income because it has no variance. Now, somebody once asked me, said, well, why does it not go up and down like my bond fund does? And I said, that's because the insurance company holds them to maturity. So they don't care what the current value of that particular asset is. They only care what the maturity date is. So there's no variance. There's no up and down. So it's a much more stable asset and a much more accretive asset than bonds are. Like what happened in 2022 and 23 when interest rates started to spike up caused bond funds, because they're valued every day, to lose, quote, quote, approximately 15 to 20% of their value. So we use that as a tactic, right? We use life insurance overfunded as a tactic to replace the bonds. Now, what's really interesting is when you do the math, makes the life insurance free. Like the life insurance actually winds up being, well, that's the core of the product. It winds up being free. You get better results from the investment, and you get better outcomes from the death benefit that shows up. And there's no more, like this isn't a cash flow issue. This is an asset proxy, right? You're moving funds from fixed income to ADO. You're not spending the money. So that's one of the tactics, and so anyway, I forget where we were going, Julian.
That's okay. The profession, the industry, or the profession, present and
So
future.
when I go to my compliance people, they lose their mind because we've decreased the amount of fixed income in the portfolio, but they don't take into account it went to the insurance policy. It's still there, It's just in a different place, in a better place. And so they don't take that into account when they have to do their know your client and all the rest of that crap when you have, when you're dealing with the person's health. So it's a better facility, but they haven't got the tools or the mindset. They have too narrow a perspective. So one of the things that years ago when I was chair of advocates, this is before the MFTA, there was a series of talking meetings, and Julia Dublin, who's the vice chair of the Ontario Securities Commission, traveled along, and we both had conversations with advisors as to what the new regime could or might look like. They hadn't settled it yet. And so I was of the opinion that we should have a fiduciary standard as opposed to a best interest standard. And that would separate the salespeople from the planning people. So I was having a cocktail with her. I don't drink very much. So I was having a glass of wine or whatever, and she'd had 3 drinks. And so I was complaining about there's a lack of harmony between the regulatory regimes. And she said, Brian, what you don't understand is all advisors are guilty of something. We just haven't caught them yet.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bit of an eyebrow raiser, to say the least. I mean, but that is the mindset. Like under the charter, we all have a presumption of innocence. You are presumed innocent until proven guilty. That is not how the people in the regulatory industry operate. You are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. So
Well,
that
you have a personal experience with that, don't you?
I actually do, yeah. Yeah, that's a, as I like to say, 2-beer story. So it takes a while to tell. But just suffice to say that I chased my tail, trying to find, I had been accused of a bunch of stuff by a mentally ill employee of mine who ultimately wound up committing suicide. It was really tragic all the way through, all the way around. So I wound up having to deal with the Ontario Securities Commission, the Investment Dealers Association, the Mutual Fund Dealers Association, the Saskatchewan Financial Services Commission, and the Canadian Association of Financial Planners, just to name a few. My dealer at the time was Assante, and they were exceptionally predatory. They, in fact, gained access to my office and searched the office for things they could use to help to get me fired. So we came to a settlement about that. Okay, so that's part of the story. In 2005, I received a very cursory note from the MFTA, and it simply said, we are closing our file at this moment. But it didn't say, was I guilty? Was I not guilty? It doesn't say anything like that. It just says we're closing our file at this moment. So that means it could be opened up at any moment. And so for 20 years, I've had that hanging over my head. And so I litigated with them. And I've had litigation going on for that 20 years. And we finally got all of the internal documentation from all of those entities that I identified. Internally, they recognized that I was exonerated completely, and they never told me. These are not people who are going to heaven. Okay, that's how I look at it, Julian.
Yes.
They're kind of evil.
Yes. Let's switch
Sure.
tunes for a moment and talk about Stanley Mallard and his relationship to you. And
oh, my grandfather. Yeah, my grandfather came to Canada in 1926 from England. He was born in 1901. So he was 25 years old, came to Canada. He was in love with a young lady, Maud Meredith, nice Welsh lady. And she came a year later. And they got married at the train station in Winnipeg in 1927. Anyway, I got to know my grandfather pretty well. And over the years, he was one of my favorite people. Just really, really a neat guy. So in 1991, Canada Life was having a conference in London, and they were staying at the Strand Hotel. And that's the exact hotel where my grandfather used to be a chauffeur. And so I thought it'd be a cool deal to take him back to London with me, and we could do some traveling around, hopefully meet some people that he might have known at the time, etc. And the people in charge at Canada Life said, well, we can't let you do that. It was bizarre. Like they can't dictate who I can take or not take. And I said, if you're going to put that in place, I don't think we have a relationship anymore. So that's when I moved over to Assante and all of that sort of stuff. And eventually I kind of got backdoored back into Canada Life. I'm now associated with Canada Life. I have a Canada Life career contract. I never gave it up. So Assante and I parted ways. I helped start Assante. In 2006, I left them and joined Great-West Life, which eventually wound up having Canada Life, right? So I'm back in the same saddle. But the people who tried to do that are all gone. All gone.
New people. What
Better
role,
attitude.
what role does Marlene, your wife, play in the business or in your life?
Well, she's got the most common sense of anybody that I've ever met. She is insightful. She is really supportive. She is my best friend. We've been married for 54 years. Yeah, she's great. She's definitely going to heaven. So.
Right. How many kinds of advisors are there in your view?
There are two kinds of advisors in my mind. There are finders and there are minders. And sometimes people have one characteristic but not the other. And sometimes people have both. Having both of those characteristics, it's kind of rare. Usually people have a bias towards one or the other. So I'm kind of a minder. I have a very fluid philosophy, which is do what you do best and delegate the rest. So I followed that all the way through. So I do what I do best, which is solve the puzzle, communicate with the client, et cetera, and then look for new clients through, were you happy with what we did? Did somebody come to mind? Would you mind calling them and introducing me? So that's what I do. So you need both characteristics. Generally, people who are finders aren't good at minders of the business, looking after the detail. So sometimes you should say, is this something I'm good at? Or are other people better at it? If they're better at it, you should delegate it.
So when you say delegated, what does your staff look like, or what surrounds you to help you accomplish what you do? Who?
I have a paraplanner that I work with. Actually, I have two paraplanners that I work with. And then I have somebody that looks after all the detailed stuff with regards to client communication. Maria's the one that books the appointments, makes sure that everything works properly. She communicates with whichever companies we're dealing with as well. Inside the office, we have a compliance officer, we have an office manager, we have processors, all of that sort of stuff. So I don't do any of that. I know how to do that, but I'm not really good at it. And honestly, those are positions which are that are necessary, but they're not very accretive. They don't make money. What makes money is the clients, their assets, their plans, and the referrals. That's what makes the money. So that's what I should be doing most of the time.
Is anybody else doing that with you?
Yeah, I have 5 other advisors in the office, and we have lots of shared business. Again, that's because people come to the table with different skill sets, right? I have one set of skill sets, and so that's just me. So me just being me is not necessarily enough to satisfy all the clients, etc. So almost, I would say 80% of my business is on a joint basis with the other advisors in the office.
Now, do they bring the business, do they bring the people to the table, or do you all equally participate in bringing new people?
We all participate. We're all pretty good finders. And some of us have better skill sets around minding, but we're all really good at finding. So that's a short answer to your question, Julian.
Okay, thank you. Question, if you had it all to start and do again, what would you do the same way, and what would you do differently?
What would I do the same way? Well, I would absolutely want to start as an insurance a provider, right? Whatever you want to call it, insurance agent. We'll go with that. I'd start with that. And I would move towards financial planning really quickly. I don't think it's proper to simply look at one strategy, which is the insurance strategy. I think you have to be broader than that. And again, it goes back to my philosophy of be the client. When I was selling life insurance and saying, how much would you take? I was a salesperson when you get right down to it. And as I said, nobody wants a product, everybody wants a plan. So I would have started the planning process a lot sooner. And I would have broadened my product shelf to include investment products a lot sooner. Because it's not like insurance is a great facility, but if you're going to really own the client relationship, you have to do the plan. You have to do the holistic plan across the board. So that's what I would have done. I would have started. So when in 1990, when I started, Dataplan and all that kind of stuff, I would have done that earlier, a lot earlier. I would have tried to find somebody like an asset management company like Loring Ward at the time. I would have tried to, I should have done that, and I didn't, because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yes. So what advice would you have for somebody just starting then?
Find somebody that you can mentor with. Find somebody that's been around and that's doing it right, and then become their best friend. Because they're going to show you and not just tell you how to survive and how to succeed. Find a mentor.
Thank you. You mentioned that you were finished with MDRT. At any
Well,
point, at what point in your life was MDRT of use and value to you?
Oh, initially it was validation that I was economically someone that people could deal with, right? That I wasn't, this wasn't my first sale. This was not my first rodeo. So it was evidence that, I knew what I was doing. And it was evidence that built my confidence as well. So there comes a point though where I didn't need that anymore. I liked a lot of the folks that are associated with MDRT, top of the table, etc. But I wasn't getting, I found Kayla was giving me more validation and more information, relevant information, than MDRT. So I finally just said, you know what, I'm just not done. I'm just done. Don't want to do that anymore.
You have a story about somebody named Norm.
Norm, tell me, just give me a bit more information.
That's all I recall. Sorry. That's as much as I can go. You were a personal producing general agent way back for Canada Life. Weren't you?
Yeah.
Weren't you about one first?
So in 1979-ish, I took a hard look at the agency system, and I just said, man, this is just not working very well. Too many recruits. I mean, managers were being bonused on the number of recruits they hired, not the number of people that stayed and were being productive. And I said, this is all wrong. It's just not the right way to do it. So I thought about it and said, well, you know what? I'm running a business now, and I don't really need the manager anymore. He's off trying to find new people on a constant basis. So why should I be paying for that adventure? And so I approached Canada Life and I said, you need to have a different contractual arrangement for people who are actually running businesses and not being a salesperson. And so that didn't go over well, to say the least. But eventually, over about a 9-month period, we created a personal producing general agency contract. And essentially what it did is it doubled your compensation, but you had to double your production to get it. So the managers were held whole, right? Because they were getting the 50% decrease, but you had to double the production. So they were whole. So everybody wins. So in my world, when you're doing a deal, everybody has to win. Because if they don't, they're going to get even. That's always the way. If somebody is being, disadvantaged because of something in a deal, they're going to try and get even. I've seen it and seen it and seen it. So that was one of the things I said to those folks. I said, we have to make sure that everybody's happy, that everybody's satisfied. And so that is exactly what we did. So, yeah, I signed my contract with them. That particular contract, I think it was like 1982, 81, 82, something like that. And there was a guy named Marv Mizurlik, who was a Polish guy who had been in World War II, and he was quite the character. And so after we'd signed up and done all that stuff, Canada Life's at 330 University Avenue in Toronto. We walked across the street to the Hotel Toronto, and had a drink, celebration, right? Toast. And I said to him, I said, Marv, I think this is going to change the way life insurance is contracted in the future. I think it's going to change it. I think the agency system is going to go the way of the dodo. And he looked at me and he said, in his Polish accent, he said, "Oh, Brian, you are so full of yourself." So I had to laugh. I've laughed about that a lot. Yeah, I was sort of full of myself. I thought we'd really accomplished something. And so all life insurance products are now sold through GAs of some kind or another, general agencies.
So you were right there at the front end of it all.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be there. Yeah. Have some input into it. So yeah.
Brian, you spent a lot of your career in your life volunteering. Chair of advocates and head of this and head of that. What role has that played in your life? And what was your motivation for that? And how do you feel about it now?
I have a certain sense of impatience. And so when I watched how the industry was evolving, I wasn't very happy with the way it was being compartmentalized, focusing on bad actors, focusing on things that just aren't really helping the consumer. So the only way you can fix those things, you can't ignore them. You can't just hope somebody else will do it. You have to get involved. So I got involved. So I had thoughts that, okay, this would be a better way to do things. And I think I'm right. Like, if you want to find the bad actors in our business, there's a tell. I was the claims chair for the Advocates Protection Association for many, many years. And so I would get all the data from the insurance company, like who was being a problem, who's lodging the claims, what were the claims related to. And I was only interested in claims that involved client loss, like theft. And so I found something, a characteristic, which is widely available and widely used, that would identify people who have a high probability of stealing the money. You know what it is? Credit scores. Credit scores. If you have an individual who's got a credit score below 600, there's a high probability that they're going to do something that harms the client and enriches them because they need the money. So my suggestion was, if somebody has a low credit score, they should immediately be put on close supervision. They can't do anything without having somebody else examine it and sign off on it. So I do know of a couple of MGAs that have taken that and put it in place, that protocol. But that's a real tell. Like if you have somebody that's got a low credit score, it's because they're not handling money responsibly. You don't really want that person to be handling other people's money because they can't even handle their own money. So they've got to go into close supervision. So that's one of the examples of where I got involved. I helped found and create the Atlas of the Advocates Protection Association. Back in what year was that? That would have been like, I want to say 1998, maybe 1999. Our E&O carrier dropped us. So we had to find an E&O carrier. And I said, why don't we own the contract? Why don't we own this business? And so Steve Howard and I put it together, did a business plan and put it to the board, and then we created the APA. And the APA is one of the few things within Advocates that makes money. It actually delivers a profit each and every year. Still does that to this day.
And how did you feel about your time with Advocates, other than the creation of
Well, I was the last chair of CAFA and the first chair of Advocates. And so we tried to merge the CAFP with CAFA and come up with Advocates, TFAC. You know what? The whole world hates a vacuum. And so what we created was a vacuum. And so immediately other associations sprung up. And so I wanted a single voice that could go to the regulators, go to the companies, negotiate, et cetera, and represent the advisors. That's where I thought we needed to be. And I still think that. But nope, that's not what happened. Other people decided that, you know what, I can do this better, so I should do this. Too much me and not enough them. So we had the right idea, but our execution was not what it could have been. And so it's a fragmented kind of presentation that we give to the regulators, to all of those folks. And so when you have fragmentation, they can always point and say, well, they say it should be done this way, not the way you're saying. So I'll tell you one thing I know. The dietitians in Canada have one organization. So, you get all the same information from the dietitians professional organization, because there isn't another one. The Canadian Medical Association is exactly the same way. We're not. We're not even close. So that was a frustration. That was a huge frustration. I spent a lot of time. Well, I'm one of the. I know that I'm going to heaven because I have a million mile club with Air Canada. So I flew with Air Canada. Means I've been in hell. So I'm going to heaven just because of that. So yeah, so my 3 years as the chair of Advocates and my 1 year as the chair of CAFA I thought that was enough of a commitment, enough of a contribution. And it's not that that I'm not available. I'm available. I sat on the APA for a very long time. But times was up, right? So Roger McMillan was the chair of that, and he and I are very, very good friends. And I said to him, Roger, I'm tired. I'm just really tired. And so I think it's time for me to go. So I resigned from there, and they're still doing a good job, to a certain extent, but we should be our own insurance company. We don't really need to go and lay it off with another carrier. We are large enough and we have enough reserves that we should be our own insurance company.
What would your advice be to young people starting out in terms of their volunteer activities in our industry? Or
if something's bothering you, get involved to change it. What'll happen is that, lots of times you're wrong. And so you will learn more from being involved than sitting on the sidelines and just complaining. You will learn a lot more and you'll be a better person for it.
Brian, what's in store for you in the next 25 years?
I'm trying to remember. Okay, it was one of the news broadcasters in the U.S. Was asked, he was retiring. He said, somebody asked him, "So what's your next objective?" And he said, "Well, my death." So sooner or later, you're going to have to face that fact. So I've actually been dead twice. They found a tumor in my heart a number of years ago, and I had to go through massive heart surgery and recovered. I'm fine. But I was literally dead when they did the surgery. Your heart is stopped and you're on a heart-lung machine. By the way, the guy that runs a heart-lung machine is called a perfusionist. I never knew that. Perfusionist. They're not really doctors. That's a specific discipline. And believe me, when you're having heart surgery, you want a good perfusionist. Anyway, so I wound up, I was fine afterwards. I recovered completely. I'm a pretty fit guy. My daughter is a CrossFit aficionado. She owns a CrossFit box, and she's hired by CrossFit International to train the trainers. And she recently got a master's degree in science, specializing in human nutrition. So she knows way more about that whole field than anybody I've ever met. She's amazing. So she was really the person that changed my life and made me face the consequences of my diet, my lifestyle, etc. So at one point in my life, I was I'm 145 pounds today. And at one point I was more than 225 pounds. I was a fat guy. And so one thing I know about fat guys is they really don't live a long time, and their health is so impaired that what life they have isn't of the highest quality it could be. So I'm a bit of a fanatic about that. I CrossFit 4 times a week and very disciplined around that. CrossFit isn't the only way
to be
to get fit.
practicing for another 50 years.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen, Julian, but I'll tell you what, the way it should happen is that I should be able to go to my CrossFit class when I'm 88 and I go to bed that night and I don't wake up. That'd be perfect.
How close are we at this point, Brian? Or is that an impolite question?
I'm 72.
Oh, so we've got a few more years with you.
Yeah, that's true. So my age and IQ are getting close together, though. You got to watch that. So, one of the questions you asked me is, what would I change? Actually, not much. Really, not much. Even the episodes that were at the time problematic were educational. Like when you're successful, you don't learn anything from your success. When you fail, you should learn something from your failure. Failures are the only thing that will educate you.
Wonderful, wonderful point. So, Brian, are you taking on any mentees?
Yeah, I talk to people. I'm open.
You think I'm too far away?
No, I don't think you're too far away. They have these newfangled things that we had so much trouble getting onto this morning. They call them Zoom meetings. I'm not much of a fan of Zoom for some reason. Most of mine are Teams, but I don't have any problem with that at all. I still do the odd public speaking. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I still do the odd one. So I'd rather have conversations like this with people, like with you and me.
Yeah. What have I not asked you that I should have asked you in the remaining few minutes that we have together?
Well, that's an interesting. You know what? I'd have to think about it, and I'll get back to you. So, what the current condition is not the permanent condition until you're dead. There's always room for change. How's that?
Maybe you could describe that a little further for me.
Well, lots of times people will panic because the market went down. But that's not a permanent condition, right? It goes up some days too. You don't know when and you don't know how much, but the current condition is never the permanent condition. Everything changes. Change is a characteristic that is not going away until you're dead. Then it goes away. So don't
Or
lose a
maybe
lot
it doesn't.
well, yeah. Well, what happens then is that the things that were bothering you are laid off on somebody else. So, we as adults have a responsibility to make sure that when we leave this planet, we do it in the right way. We don't leave a problem. We don't create a problem and leave it to somebody else to solve. That's unfair. So be an adult because you are one.
What are the three things you're proudest of over this? How many years has it been?
50. 50
50?
years. So if you want from a business perspective or just generally in life?
Yes.
Okay. Generally in life, the things I'm proudest of are my grandsons, my daughter and her husband, my marriage, some of the associates that I've had for many, many years. Tanis, who's my wife's niece, she's been with me almost 30 years. We have a lot of long-term relationships in my business that have been around for a long time. I'm grateful to all of my partners. I'm grateful to all of the people that work with me. I'm grateful to all of my clients. They've been through all of the trials and tribulations that I've had to go through, particularly with the regulatory people. We didn't lose a single client. We did not lose a single client. New clients, that's a whole nother story, but with our clients, that none of them left, not one. So I'm grateful for that, extremely grateful, So
It's an amazing
those are
testament.
personal, those are, I suppose, business things. Like, it's hard to separate that, like I treat my business very personally. I don't look at it as just a job. It's part and parcel, right? You should always you should find something that you like. If you're going to have a career, you should find something that you like. So eventually, I didn't sell life insurance. I didn't sell mutual funds. I solved puzzles for other people and made their life better. So I didn't realize that's what I wanted, but that's really what I wanted.
And what is it that all your clients wanted? What did they want to know? What did they
Well,
want
they
to
want to know a very simple question. Am I going to be okay? The heart, like in everybody's heart, that's the question that can't be answered. Am I going to be okay? Or my family, is it going to be okay going forward? And they can't answer that question because they don't have the skill sets. We do. We have the skill sets. We can answer that question positively or negatively. Whatever the answer is, it is what it is. Now, can we help and make it better? Yes, that's what the skill sets are for. So I think that's a very noble calling. And I think ultimately, the trusted advisor isn't the accountant, it isn't the lawyer, it's the financial planner, because we know the client holistically.
Wow, I think that's a great place for us to wrap up our day.
Sure.
What an absolute treat it's been chatting with you.
Well, what an absolute treat it has been for you to question me. The last time I was questioned like this was with the MFDA investigators. No, I'm kidding you, Julia. You've been such a gentleman. So yeah, this has been very enjoyable.
I'm glad. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Lawrence. And thank you, Krista. I don't know who you are, but you have a nice picture on this webcast.
Krista is Zoltan Barzo's daughter.
Oh,
She's in
okay.
the insurance business. She does a lot of work with Dave Paycharge. And she also, as in helping him with the association that he's worked on. She also is a stunt director. She works on things, and she's a producer of movies, short films, and docudramas, if you wish. So she is a multifaceted lady. Brian, it seems to me that your whole life has followed determine the worst case scenario and best case scenario and everything you can in between. Treat it as a puzzle. It's a cryptogram. And people's life is a cryptogram. And the reason you need the Monte Carlo scenario is none of us knows when we're going to go. And if we don't leave a mess behind us, that should be our ultimate goal in life, because it's a really admirable one. Brian, I thank you for your service to the profession. You've been involved through a great many trying times, and for the lead that you've set for advisors who, by stint of having good files and good client relationships, and having always done the right thing, you came through a very difficult situation with stars. And that's something that most of us would like to be able to do if we, God forbid, face the tribulations that you've been through. Your role with Advocates through the transition was instrumental. And I'm not sure very many other people could have done that. And it was your broad mindset that allowed you to do it. And I thank you for that. And I'm sorry, I should not get on my high horse and preach, but I agree.
Lawrence, you and I have been friends for a long time. And, you know, we call a spade a spade. So I thank you so much for your mentorship and for the initiative that you've taken to try and leave a legacy of all those people that were in the insurance business, in the financial planning business, and made so many lives better.
That's our goal.
Yep.
So the 14th session next week, that'll be April the 25th, will feature Mario Malatesta. The following week, Mildred Davis, and then Michelle Wilson, and Julian will be back with Michelle. Micheline Veras from Custom Plan Financial, Sue Cracy, and then David and Jeffrey Hull, Bill Bell from Montreal, Robert Crowder, Chris Facey. The lineup goes on, and it's being added to fairly regularly. I thank you for joining us today, and hope that we'll see you again next week. If you know others who might be interested, please let them know about the series. But also, if you know people who we could benefit from knowing about, so that we can interview them as part of this series, I'd appreciate your getting in touch with me. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Julian, for another exemplary interview.